The fact is that most of us in our culture define who we are and how well we're doing, and even our very humanity, on the basis of some very artificial criteria. Those criteria, most of the time, are considered by people in our culture to be the ultimate. And they are things like success. How much success do I have? That is, how much money am I making? How much stuff comes into my life? How many accumulations am I able to get? And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But as a criteria for your very humanity, it's a very low point. It's a very shallow place to determine whether or not you're living the kind of life that you're capable of living. Another one is performance, which we tend to laud in our culture and to almost worship. I'm number one. You see it all the time, people making a contest out of life, and performance being measured in terms of how far I get and what position I achieve in life, or what awards I have granted to me, or whatever. And the other is achievement. How far have I gone in my profession? How am I looked at by my peers and by other people in terms of my grades and my position on the ladder of success within a given corporation, things like that. These are almost like the ultimate in our culture, in the business world, in the educational world, in the entertainment world, whatever. We're always talking about success, achievement, and performance. What has happened for me, and what has happened for a lot of people, particularly in some of my recent books and tapes and so on, is that after you live this life for a while and you find yourself achieving a lot of things and performing at a very high level and being labeled a success by all of the external standards, you soon discover that there's an emptiness to that there's more to life than just being able to do that. That emptiness and that shallow feeling, and that it's just sort of almost like a selfish pursuit, gratifying one's ego and proving that we can accumulate as much stuff as we can, and success isn't any longer measured in terms of how we serve others, but in terms of how much I get for myself. And our goals become obsessions, not that we need any more, but that we've fallen into this trap of believing that we have to accumulate more, we have to get more, we have to perform at a higher level. If we win the championship, that's great, but how about doing it 2 times in a row? Nobody's ever done that before. And if we do it twice in a row, well, now we've got to do it 3 times in a row. And now we have to do it by shutting out our opponents completely. They can never get a point. And we are constantly looking outside of ourselves for these kinds of almost artificial ways of defining ourselves as human beings. And when you get trapped into that, you find that there's a lack of a sense of fulfillment. And what I want to talk about and make happen in this program is to have people ask the question, what would it be like to live your life as a work of art? A work of art that's in progress. That is, your life becomes a masterpiece that is unfolding in every moment of your life. Instead of looking at it in terms of how much can I get or how far can I go, begin to see that, all right, yes, I am capable of lots and lots of wonderful things, and I have accumulated a lot of things, and I've achieved at a very high level, and I'm performing very well, but I want to take a different perspective on what my life is. And I want to begin to see my life as this fabulous work of art, that I can shape it and shade it and mold it into whatever it is that I think would be the absolute ideal for my contribution while I'm here on this planet, for the actual unfolding of my humanity. And if you were to ask anybody, what is it that you would really like to have said about yourself, whose life would you look at and say, this is what I would like to have been said about me? Or this is the masterpiece that I would like my life to be. Would it be about how much stuff did I get? Or how big was my bank account? Or how fast did I run? Or how quickly did I get there? Or who did I beat in the process? For some, it might be, and that might be very satisfying. But on a much higher level than that, the answer to that question, for me, is in looking at the lives of people like Christ, who was perhaps the most influential person ever to live on our planet, ever to be on our planet. Muhammad, Buddha, spiritual masters who were leaving a message about the power of the human mind. More recently in our times, people like Gandhi, who was able to turn around the whole fate of a nation that had been subservient to an empire, the British Empire, all through a nonviolence and all through an approach to loving people and not making conflict something that has to be debilitating or destructive, and to literally put them on a course of running their own lives, all through simplicity and all through a sense of beauty and appreciation. Or Mother Teresa, who labors in the streets of Calcutta, just serving and just giving, and knows what she is for, and knows that she's not against anything. You see, the irony, there's a real irony in all of this, and I'm not here to put down, in any sense of the word, success and performance and achievement. I'm a person who has a lot of all of those things in my life. But I've found that those are the kinds of things that begin to matter less and less, and they show up more and more in your life when you find yourself getting more tuned into something much beyond all of that. It's like a knowingness. It's like creating a sense of what I'm here for, how I'm going to live this life that I have, and doing it in the service of others, maintaining a sense of spirituality about yourself, maintaining a sense of compassion and caring and love and decency for everyone that you meet, treating conflict and difficulties that come your way not as something for which you have to win or to master, but in fact as opportunities for you to see how you can transcend these things and not to have to use hatred and anger and bitterness and beating somebody else down in order to get to this higher place. It's very much a place of peace, and it doesn't mean like abdicating your role in life. It doesn't mean that you can no longer be an architect or that you can't be a salesman or whatever it is that you choose to do for a living. It's much beyond that. It's the way that you are, not what you're getting out of the way that you are. It's that wonderful work of art that your life becomes, that you begin to see that I can make my life unfold exactly the way the universe unfolds, with a real sense of perfection and harmony and peace for myself. And the more I do that, the paradox is that all of the things that I chased after so hard and so diligently show up in your life just the right amounts. It's an attitude of knowing, of surrendering, not to anyone, but surrendering from the things that most of us are pursuing all of our lives, where we get on that stress-filled, fast pace. I have to achieve, I have to perform, I have to succeed, I have to become number one, I have to beat everybody else in order to prove myself. You begin to develop an inner sense of harmony, that those kinds of things are very low-level determiners of what kind of a human being you're going to be.
It's like after a while, when you read this and you study it and you write about it and you start to experience it for yourself, you start to really go there, like in a new kind of prayer, not a prayer that is to someone to do things and help the Lions win this Sunday or whatever. It isn't that kind of a prayer at all. And you begin to experience it, and all of a sudden you start saying, you know, what these people have been saying for centuries is true. I mean, it's really true. That's the first experience I ever had with that. Was just alarming. My sister-in-law, Marilyn, was driving on the Lodge Freeway in Detroit with her husband, my brother, and their 3 children in the back seat. Now, she is a hardcore, linear, left-brain skeptic, okay? Worse than any banker could ever be, all right? And any accountant, all right? I mean, you had to show me. Otherwise, it doesn't exist for her. Medicine was her model. Anything that has to do with the mind, very skeptical. This car jumped the guardrail on the other side, on the southbound lane, and landed right in her face at 60 miles an hour. She saw the wheels coming and land right there. Every bone in her face was broken. Her kidneys were punctured. She had internal bleeding and was in intensive care for 13 weeks. They took her into the hospital unconscious. And no one thought that she was going to survive the night. She was really in bad shape. And they performed surgery on her for 14 hours. And there was a team of surgeons, 6 of them. And they were talking during the surgery. As you can imagine, for 14 hours you would be talking. My sister-in-law reported to me in 1971, when I was 31 years old, and just sort of starting on this path, that she watched the entire surgery. She said, Wayne, you're the only person, you're the only weird one in the family. All right? And you're weird enough to believe this, you know. And it's true, I am, because when I even worked with the mental patients and doing my postdoctoral stuff, they all got together on my birthday, and I mean, these were the real these were people who thought they were Napoleon and were really convinced, you know, and they all got together and they gave me a briefcase for my birthday. And I said, you know, you really shouldn't have done this. And they said, oh, we like you better than all the other doctors. I said, really, why? And one woman said, well, she said, you're more like one of us. You know, I said. So anyway, Marilyn said to me, Wayne, she said, what happened is that I left my body. And she said, I went up to the corner of the room. I was surrounded by this light, and I was in the presence of God. It was like a consciousness. It was like, I can't describe it because it doesn't have boundaries. It didn't have form, but it was a magnificent light. And I was there, and there was this tunnel. And I could have gone through this tunnel, and I had the choice, and it was so peaceful, and it felt so good. It was the most blissful I've ever been in my life. And she said, and I watched the surgeons performing on me, and I watched them working on my body, knowing that that wasn't me. When she came out of it after 14 hours of surgery, there were 2 of the surgeons, they were voting on whether they should continue this or not, or whether they should just pull the plug. She had very little heartbeat at all, and she was so badly punctured internally, and her bleeding was so bad, and there was infection and so on, that they just didn't think she would, and if she did survive, they thought it was. So 2 of them were saying, let's just give up on this, you know, and go on to other people. The 4 doctors prevailed, who said that we really believe that we can save this person. And Marilyn then made it. She had 3 little children, my 2 nephews and 1 niece were in the backseat. They were just little children at the time, 2, 4, and 5. And Marilyn decided that she could re-enter, even though it was painful and didn't want to do it. She was given, it's like given the choice. And she went back. And when she came out of it, she told the surgeons which ones had said, let's give up on it, and which ones had said, let's stay with it. And she had gave them word for word what they had said during this event. And she said it was at that time that I became really, truly aware. And she said since then, she has gotten to meet some of what they call NDEers, near-death experiences. And that everybody who has this near-death experience, Raymond Moody writes about it, has the same thing to report. And that is that when they come back, and they do it reluctantly, they have what we call the big picture. And since then, I mean, you wouldn't believe my sister-in-law. She is the calmest, most loving, easiest going. You can't get to her. You can't get to her. She has an inner candle flame that never flickers, though the worst goes before her. And the worst is my brother. And he goes before her all the time. And he's very linear. He's an insurance judge. He's a wonderful, loving, beautiful person. All of his stuff is motivated out of caring and concern. He wants to always, but he wants to do so damn much that it becomes like, all right, enough. I got the map. All right, yeah, but do you know which turn to make? Yeah, I know. And it's half an hour of that kind of. And she just sits there and just reads. And when there's a family squabble and people get themselves all upset, she just picks up a book and just excuses herself. And she goes over into the corner, and the kids say, you know, when someone will be around, their friends, they say, what's with your mom? And they all say, oh, she's got the big picture. It's like having the big picture. And these people, all of them report when they come back from that, they have this like near-death experience. It's like tension and stress and anxiety and fear and all of that stuff that occupies so much of our lives is just gone. It's just not a part of the consciousness any longer. My suggestion is that we don't have to have that kind of traumatic event happen to our form to understand the universal principles and to surrender to them and to make them work every day in our life. That we don't have to go there. that we can unmuddle all of this metaphysical psychobabble, jargons kind of stuff, and begin to live the spiritual life and have the understanding that we are truly spiritual beings having a human experience, and that the quality of that human experience is only available to us through our thoughts, through our mind, through our divine connection. And that whatever your religious belief, whatever label you place on yourself, try not to think of yourself as Christian. Try to be Christ-like, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Try not to think of yourself as Jewish, but be Jehovah-like, or Buddha-like, or Mohammed-like. These were not people who were asking anyone to deify idols and wooden deities and an orthodoxy. But instead we're talking about kindness and love and forgiveness and gentleness and spirit, and that we're all connected, and you begin to live that way. And it's really quite an easy thing to do.
It just depends on where you are in your path. Some people need that. Like some people who are alcoholics or drug abusers continue to drink and continue to use drugs, knowing that if their life was threatened, they would stop, and knowing that they have the strength to stop at any time, but being unwilling to do it because they don't feel that the threat to their life is there. And then the threat comes. They go to the doctor, they go in for a physical, they find out that they've got a lump on their lungs, they find out that their wife is going to leave them because they're abusing drugs all the time, they're going to lose their family, and they come home one day and their family is gone. Or whatever. And that's like a near-death experience emotionally, to lose your family or to find out that you've got lung cancer or whatever. And they instantly become transformed. Now, what does it take to get people to get the big picture? Well, what does it take to get people to change? The answer to that is different for everybody. I can't pretend to say that I have an answer. There are some people who need, for example, to change, they need a support group, and they need a therapist, and they need to go to a rehabilitation center, and they need to read 400 books, and they need to listen to these kinds of tapes, and they need to reinforce it over and over and over again in their lives in order to change. And that's the way some people are wired together. And that's all fine. And if that's how your internal circuitry works, then by all means, go with it. I, on the other hand, am not that kind of a person. I make decisions instantaneously about what my life is going to be or not going to be. When I was a young boy, I tasted coffee. I had a cup of coffee that was given to me. I was about 14 or 15 years old. I tasted it. It was bitter. It tasted funny. It tasted like chemicals that I didn't want to. And I said to my mother and my brothers, I will never drink coffee in my life. Now I'm 49 years old now, okay? That was many, many years ago. It was 35 years ago. And I tasted it, knew it, and made that declaration, and I have never had a cup of coffee since then. I look at the coffee, people offer it to me and everything, and I just know that I don't want that bitter taste in my mouth, and I don't want that caffeine, and I know that, all right? So that's how I am able to make change. But that doesn't mean that that's the right way and that's the best way. And I can sit here with great confidence and say that I won't be drinking coffee, and I'll never have a cigarette. I can say that for certain, having quit 25 years ago. And I can say for certain about a lot of things in my life, that I won't be overweight, that I will stay in shape, and all of those kinds of things. For others, it's a daily struggle, and it's like it's coming to know yourself. So the path to the big picture is different for everyone. But the understanding has to be that the big picture is there, and its availability is there. And if you need to have a near-death experience, like Marilyn did, in order to get that big picture and be able to relax in the face of conflict, be able to not allow yourself to get stressed out over small things, being able to enjoy your present moments and find fulfillment and joy in them, then have that near-death experience, but have it in your mind only. Okay? So create that experience for yourself. One of the ways to do that is through meditation. Another way to do that is just by visualizing or just imaging it for yourself. Participate in your own funeral, in your mind if you have to. See yourself dying of a horrible disease and suffering. Go through it. Experience it. Die while you're alive. Experience that whole thing. And as you experience that, see for yourself that this doesn't have to be brought into form. That I can act it out in my mind like a dream, live through it, get the experience of it, and then decide, well, I don't have to bring this into my form any longer. And make then a decision not to do it. So whatever it takes for you, all I'm saying is that you don't have to go through it in the world of form. In your physical world, you can transform, go beyond your form. You can be metaphysical, go beyond the physical, experience it in your mind where there are no limits. There's no limits to your imagination. There's no limits to your thoughts. But literally be there. And then when you come out of it, realize that, okay, that's enough. I've done that now. Let me practice the big picture. Let me see it isn't anything that I have to really create in my life any more than that. And once you're able to do that, once you can create that for yourself, then you get all the benefits of the big picture. By the big picture, I mean, you know in your heart and in your soul that there's more to life than just what my body is going through. And you know that there's nothing worth getting yourself all bogged down about and getting all depressed about and all worked up about. You know it all. You see all of that. And everything that I'm doing to create that, like Marilyn, I'm always amazed at Marilyn, how she's able to just let all of that stuff just float by her. When the kids have this particular problem, when my brother gets on her about that, or when things aren't going, how she just sort of calmly, and ever since that accident, has calmly just gone off in a corner and just sort of let it all work itself out. It's part of the surrendering process. When we take this power of this invisible part of us, it's so hard to define this. We call it a belief, or you call it a thought, or you call it your soul, or your spirit, or whatever. But that invisible part of you that really determines everything about your life. And you begin to say to yourself, all right, how can I apply the awareness of these thoughts and how I use my mind to make my life all that I want it to be? To bring into my life the things that are important to me, to improve the quality of my relationships, to have the success and so on that I think that I'm entitled to. And it's really getting to the point where you know that every thought that you have has a potential for coming into your life, for coming into form. You start to get real cautious about having anything in your mind that isn't going to work for you. And you begin to question why you would keep any of those thoughts in you. I can remember one story of a woman who came to me one time and told me how miserable she was, that she was married to a drunk. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, well, he slurs his words and he repeats himself and he smells bad and it's just awful to be around him. And I said, let's see if I understand. Let's see who's crazy in this little scenario you've just described. Now, you said you've married to a drunk, and the drunk slurs his words and he repeats himself, and he smells bad, and he sounds foolish. I said, that's every drunk I've ever known does exactly that. We got a drunk who's acting and doing everything that you would expect a drunk to do. Now we got you, and you're married to someone that you call a drunk, and you're expecting him to be sober. You know, now who's crazy? The drunk who's doing what he's supposed to, or you who's expecting someone who is what you've defined him to be something different than what they are? He is what he is. And why would you want to entertain, why would you want to keep thoughts in your mind that are making you miserable, which is going to expand misery for you in your life by just having those thoughts there? Why not change around those thoughts and tell yourself that you're, like if you argue for your misery, then the only thing you're going to get is your misery. You have to get that, and you're arguing for it all the time. You're going around talking about how miserable you are. So you want to get real careful about that. And I suggest to every one of you that whatever it is you find yourself incapable of doing, or whatever you found that has been a great obstacle, or whatever it is that's in a relationship that isn't working, that you just can't seem to transcend, or whatever's going on with a particular employee or a way that you're approaching anything in your business, that if you examine, just for a moment, if you examine what belief is it that supports this behavior, because the ancestor to every action is a belief, is a thought, and then work at re-examining that. I mean, I've done that so many times in my own life, and things that don't seem like they're that important to other people. Like my wife doesn't understand why certain things about my tennis game that I play every day that I've really challenged. I mean, I grew up with the belief that I couldn't hit a backhand. And it was for 10 years I told myself that I don't have a backhand, I can't hit a backhand. And then I began to change that belief around. And it wasn't that I just, practice. I began to visualize myself doing all the things that it takes to make a backhand work for myself. I began to do that with a serve. I began to do that with a drop shot. Instead of telling myself, I can't hit a drop shot, and then acting out on that, and a whole match will go by, and a whole year will go by, and I'll never hit a drop shot, or I'll never hit a lob, or I'll never try a spin serve, or whatever. If you keep telling yourself that you can't do something, you act on that belief, and whether it's just a silly little thing like improving your tennis game, which isn't so silly if you're making your living off of it, or if you're coaching it, or any other skill area, or anything in your life, change around the thought, as you think, so shall you be. Years ago, my wife and I were going through some personal difficulties. We were making a decision about whether or not we were going to stay together, very frankly. Everybody in a relationship, I believe, has these moments and times when there's a struggle there and you've been together for a while and you're not certain whether this is the right path, and you're thinking about these things and so on. And nevertheless, it was a very difficult time emotionally for both of us. And I can remember years and years ago, as we were going through this, what it did for me to be in that state. I became much more loving. I became much more concerned with other people. I became less concerned with the pettiness of so many things that you find yourself worked up about, because I had a different focus in my life. And I can remember thinking, as we resolved it and got back closer together, and today are very close and very loving together, looking back on that time as like something that I had to go through at that time. And that what it did is it helped me to see how absurd it is for us to be focused on the minutia of life. Whether or not the walls are clean, or whether or not the toys are put away, or whether or not your food is prepared on time, or whether somebody is late with something, or whether the phone doesn't ring or does ring or whatever. Like, all of those things are so minute in contrast to what you're really struggling with. And then what it also helped me to do in terms of getting this big picture was to look at some of the things that other people were going through, some of the problems and difficulties that they were having. Very often when something goes wrong in somebody else's life that we're close to, one of our parents gets ill, there's an accident of some kind. When Marilyn had that accident, I can remember how it affected me. And it gives you pause to remind yourself that you have a lot to be thankful for, and that you have a very powerful mind here that can make anything happen that you want to happen, as long as you keep yourself centered or keep yourself focused. I was able to shift from all of those petty little things. I can remember I was doing a show out in Seattle at that time that I was going through that tough period. And somebody asked me a question that 6 months before I would have answered sort of flippantly, sort of smart-alecky. It wouldn't have given it the attention that it deserved. I would have thought of it as perhaps too trivial. And I can remember looking into the woman's eyes who asked me the show. I was on a TV show out there in Seattle, and thinking, because I was struggling at that time, I became much more compassionate towards this person, much more tuned into the pain that they were feeling, even though it seemed trivial in comparison to what I was. And it allowed me to get to be more loving. And then I look back on that now and I think, well, that's what I had to learn. That's what it was for, that there's a purpose in everything. And that perhaps one of the things that I had to learn 8 or 10 years ago was how to be more compassionate. And perhaps the only way I was going to learn how to be more compassionate was to have to go through some of this stuff myself. So, like, you can do that. You can do that now in your own life. Know that there's a lesson in this for you. Know that there are no accidents in this perfect universe. And know that the deep troubles that you may be experiencing or may be hard for you have something in them for you. And that there's a secondary purpose to them. And if it does help you to slow down, and if it does help you to get a bigger picture, and it does help you to be more compassionate and more loving towards other people, then what you do is you begin to bless those things that are in your own life as offering you an opportunity to transcend them. And once you've transcended them, then you don't have to go back to that again. And for sure, my wife and I do not have to go back to ever doubting whether we want to make it and whether we want our family to stay intact and whether we want to stay loving and so on. We don't ever have to question that again. We've been there, and we both learned how to look within. And when you do look within, to be grateful for what this person is offering you. So that every time I think about my wife behaving in a way that I don't like, or vice versa, we've learned how to zip it, how to just not make ourselves miserable by saying things and by doing things that will just create more difficulties. Because we've been on the edge, we've been to that edge, and we've looked over the edge and seen what it's like to maybe have to raise a family as a single parents or whatever, and to be without each other. And now we're a tremendous source of strength to each other, instead of looking for the things that we don't like. So the way to the big picture often is through seeing the problems in your own life from a different perspective and seeing how difficult other people have it, When you're wondering about how troubled you are, look at the Alzheimer's patient whose mind is slowly slipping away from them, and they even are aware that it's happening and they don't know what to do about it. Coming up here on the airplane yesterday, there was a story in the paper of a man and his wife who just got so desperate that they had to call the police. They have 4 little children under the age of 6, just like I do. And they had to call the police because they didn't want to raise them homeless. They didn't want their children, they were being evicted from the final hotel because they had raised their rent from $160 a week to $210, and they just simply didn't have it. And rather than put their children out on the street, they called the police and asked the Department of Human Resources to come and keep their children for them for a while until they could get themselves back together. And I thought, my goodness, what kind of problems of mine could even be anything near what it must be like to be faced with the idea of having to go out on the street with my children, my little babies. And these were little babies. One was 3, one was 4, and one was 5. Just tiny little children to be out on the streets, on the cold streets. And I made a commitment that I was going to contact them when I get back and try to get them something. And other people are helping them as well. But it also gives you time to get the bigger picture, when you see things like that. It's a good thing to remember. Another thing is that in order to get this bigger picture and get to this place, that you can stop feeling sorry for yourself. You can stop the self-pity, because it's happening you've got to trust, you've got to surrender, you've got to know that what's coming your way has a purpose in it, has a lesson in it, that there's order in chaos. And underneath that chaos, you've got to look for that order and look for that blessing. And so one of the things you might have to learn is how to get off of pity and feeling sorry for yourself. And one of the ways to do that is to start focusing on doing something new, doing something different, keeping yourself occupied. Marilyn would go to her knitting. I found myself getting more wrapped up in giving talks because my talks improved, literally improved when I was going through that struggle. And so did my writing, because I was just experiencing more compassion for myself. The way to experience that compassion is to get yourself focused, get yourself on something, doing something, and then generally it will work out. The other thing, when you are concentrating on something else, or when you are doing something else, your mind can't be on what is wrong. And when you get your mind off of what is wrong, you get it on what is right. What is right is what expands, and what is wrong tends to go away.
One of the most alarming insights I had was 5 years ago when my grandmother died. I was with her. She was 95 years old. And she was an hour from death. And she was admitted to the hospital about 2 o'clock in the morning. And one of the things that the hospital did was that they weighed her for some reason. They had to have, they're into their records and keeping track of things. You don't get into heaven if you don't have a weight certificate, and maybe if you're excess baggage, you don't get in or something. I don't know what their thinking is, but there's this kind of linear, all this record keeping. I always wonder about all the people who died before we had records, before we did that. You know, whatever happened to all of them? And so she weighed 133 pounds when she entered the hospital, and we all knew that she was very close. And then life passed from her body. I mean, we watched as life literally left her body. And there she was. There was this package of, it was getting cold and stiff, and it was like this package of bones and stuff, matter. And it certainly wasn't my grandmother. That package there that was now deteriorating and going to be gone. And when they weighed her for the death certificate, she weighed 133 pounds. Exactly the same. So that whatever it is that constituted her life, her very essence, is invisible and weightless. You can't weigh it. And that's true for you. That's true for every single one of us. That what our life really is all about, it defies the world of form. It defies the world of linear. And yet we spend almost all of our energy and our time here, in this part of our consciousness, in form, believing that this is who we are. When you learn to go into your mind, when you learn that your mind is really a place that you can visit and exquisitely touch the face of God, you can remove the tension and stress and everything else that's troublesome in your life when you give yourself time to experience your true humanity. You know, John Quincy Adams sat in the White House. He was our 6th president, and he was the most spiritual man who ever sat there, I think. He was a man who rejected slavery, while other people, including one of his best friends, Thomas Jefferson, practiced it. He was a man who was highly spiritual and very intellectual, perhaps the highest intellect of anyone who ever was there. And this is what he wrote about himself 3 days before he died in a letter to Thomas Jefferson. He used his house as a metaphor for his body. And this is really the message of what I have to say here today. He said, John Quincy Adams is well, but the house in which he lives at the present time is becoming dilapidated. It's tottering on its foundations. Time and the seasons have nearly destroyed it. Its roof is pretty well worn out. I can identify with that one, I'll tell you. Its walls are much shattered and tremble with every wind. I think John Quincy Adams will have to move out of it soon. But he himself is quite well, thank you. That concept of understanding that universal intelligence that is a part of our consciousness is not just something for mystics and people to go in loincloths and contemplate in caves. It's for us. It's for every one of us in the practice of our daily lives, in whatever business we're in.
I had a hair on the pillow the other morning. I held it up to my wife. I said, honey, what held it in yesterday? Something did. It's invisible. In our culture, particularly in the West, we have a tendency to believe that this is who we are. And we decorate our form, and we perfume it, and we insure it, and we build a house around it, and we mortgage that, and we watch it, and we look in the mirror, and we say, oh my God, look at what's happening to it, and there's another wrinkle that wasn't there before, and how did that get there? And it's completely out of your control. It's all handled for you. There's such a beautiful lesson to learn, such a beautiful spiritual lesson to learn. If you look at a vase and watch a sculptor make a vase, the sculptor shapes his clay and finishes it up. And what is it that makes it a vase? You think it's the material? You think it's the pottery? You think it's the clay? No. It's the empty, silent space inside that the clay surrounds that allows it to be a vase. Otherwise, it's just some pottery. What makes this a room? What makes your house a house? Think about it. It's not the walls. It's not the material that has been put all around us that you live in. It's the space, the empty, silent space inside that makes a house a house. It's the space between the bars that holds the tiger, as they say in Zen. And it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. It's not the note. That's the note. What makes the music is the silence between the notes. And so it is with you. Robert Frost put it this way, more beautifully than I could ever say it. We all sit around in a circle and suppose, while the secret sits in the center and knows and knows. You must come in contact with that empty, silent space that is within, not the form that encapsulates it. So difficult for us in a world of bottom line, left-brained, analytical, get to the point mentality that we find ourselves in. But all you have to do is look around. Look and understand that whatever the intelligence is that is in back of or suffusing all form in the universe, that allows it to be that empty, silent space that some call God, some call spirit, some call soul, some call Muhammad, some call Buddha, the label doesn't matter. And I am not up here on this stage to proselytize for any particular religious point of view at all. It is not my purpose. It has nothing to do with what I'm here. It is to get you to understand the power of that invisible, silent, empty space that we all know as thought.
The awakening process, the awakened life, what a wonderful notion that is, to be awakened. It's like when you go to sleep at night and you're dreaming, the only way you know you're dreaming is to awaken. And it's a similar thing here, this awakened life business that we're talking about. When you wake up from this dream, this 80-year dream or 100-year dream, you begin to realize that the only way you know you're dreaming is to awaken. You want to create an awakening process where you really are looking back on the dream from a perspective of what is, rather than what you think it should be, or judging it. And there was a wonderful lady. Some of you will have heard of her. Her name was Peace Pilgrim, and no one ever knew her real name. And Peace Pilgrim was this woman who was in her 70s when she died, I believe. And she walked all across the country, just promoting peace. She was a little old white-haired lady, and she would go on television and radio stations and just talk about how positive it could be, and then she would walk to the next city and the next. There's a book out about her called Peace Pilgrim. And she had, in one of her little booklets, something that I think is really an indication of the awakened life, a real indication that you're awakening. And this is just a real short list of what some of those things are. When you see yourself moving beyond that success, that performance, that achievement that so motivates your life, and begin to awaken to a new level, to a whole new level of experience. You'll see it this way. The first thing you'll notice is a tendency to think and act spontaneously, rather than on fears based on your past experiences. In other words, you begin to trust and surrender and to have a sense of spontaneity about your life. And you're not always focused on whether it's going to work out or not going to work out, and be afraid if it doesn't. And those thoughts are you're no longer wanting those thoughts to expand in your life. And then you'll notice an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment of your life. Every moment becomes an exquisite part of your existence. And you'll find yourself, even in times when you used to think of them as boring or routine, like, maybe getting in an airport and being delayed for a couple of hours, you begin to find an unmistakable ability to enjoy that, and to not judge it, and to see it for what it is, and to even be grateful for it, that you're not getting on a plane that wasn't supposed to leave at that time. You begin to see it that way. And you begin to enjoy the little things that we so take for granted. The moments with your children. The times when there's chaos around and you think, oh my God, I'm never going to get through this. You suddenly can stop yourself in the middle of that and see the irony and the fun and the joy in it. And the quiet times, and even driving back and forth to work, or you find yourself having this unmistakable new ability to enjoy every moment that you find in your life and to treat it all as a gift. It's a sign of the awakened life. You also find that you're developing a loss of interest in judging other people. You're off of judgment. You're moving beyond that. You understand the truth and the notion that you don't define other people with your judgments. You define yourself as someone who needs to judge. That each one of us is defined by our own thoughts and our own actions. And even those people who are behaving in ways that are antisocial and that are criminal and so on, you find yourself less judging them and more seeing them for what they are. Not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable and responsible, of course. But that judgment, that inner hostility, that inner anger toward them is replaced by a sense of wondering, how could that little baby at one time who was in its mother's arms turn out this way? What created that? And I wonder if there's anything I can do to help eliminate that in other children, rather than the judgment. You find a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of other people. You don't become this great interpreter for what everybody is and what everybody is doing. The awakened life beckons you to just sort of observe it, to note it. And even in your own behavior, you become less inclined to interpret it and more inclined to say that this is just an indication of where I am or where I am not at this particular moment. And with no need to analyze it. You see, when you analyze something, analyzing is really a violent intellectual act. When you analyze something, you have to break it apart, tear it apart and break it open and find out every little piece of it. It's like intellectually violent. The opposite of analysis is what we call synthesis. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin talked about the universal synthesizer is love. You begin to see how everything fits together rather than analyzing every little bit of life and interpreting everything for people. You try to do less of that and more of seeing how we all fit together. The awakened life means a loss of confrontation. You're no longer interested in it. It just isn't important to you. It's like having to prove yourself and make a contest out of everything. It's just no longer there for you. The real sense of the awakened life behind that is that you don't have to make anybody else wrong. And you don't have to make yourself right. That's the real sense of awakening, when you begin to know that there's much more to life than making a contest out of it. I noticed that when my little boy, who's 2 years old, goes out to play, any place, the only reason that he does it is for fun. I mean, he doesn't try to win, he doesn't try to beat anybody, he doesn't try to confront anybody. He just goes out to play. And we lose that in the name of confrontation and conflict. I remember Tom Crum talking in his book, The Magic of Conflict, about an example of if you were an adult and you went to a playground and you decided to sit down with a 3-year-old and to make sandcastles. And you made all these beautiful sandcastles, and suddenly the 3-year-old stood up and kicked your sandcastle over. What would you do with that? I mean, you wouldn't try to make him wrong and make yourself right, and you wouldn't have a fit about it, and you wouldn't scream, and you wouldn't holler, and you wouldn't say, how dare you do this, such a thing, and be all upset about it, and I've made a contest out of it. You'd say, this is what 3-year-olds do. They knock over sandcastles, and it's just for play. You begin to develop that sense that inside every one of us is a little 2-year-old who wants to come out and play and doesn't have to win, and doesn't have to beat anybody, and doesn't have to be in conflict or confrontation. That little child inside of you begins to surface when you start awakening. You lose the ability to worry. I didn't say you lose worry, you lose the ability to worry. It's no longer a part of you. You begin to understand the absurdity of worry. You begin to see that it makes no sense to worry about the things that you have no control over. Because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And then it makes no sense to worry about the things that you do have control over. Because if you got control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And there goes everything that you ever worried about. You either have control or you don't. And if you don't, you move on. And if you do, you take control. As you awaken, you lose that ability to just worry about things and instead accept them. You'll notice frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation, as she puts it. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. Appreciating everything, being thankful. It's one of the great ways to become awakened in your life, is to be thankful for everything and to give thanks for it. You know, I'd like to see the churches of America have services on Sunday morning where they have like Liver Appreciation Day, you know, like to appreciate your liver every Sunday and have an ode to the liver, you know, and a theology of the liver and how grateful we are for our liver. And if we didn't have our liver, imagine, you know, and then the next week is like, you know, the Heart Appreciation Week. It's like appreciate every little tiny thing that is a part of what it is that makes you alive. Your teeth, your tongue, the air that you breathe, the ionosphere, the atmosphere, the ground, the sun, the stars. It's like you start having these overwhelming episodes of appreciation as you awaken, and you appreciate getting on a plane and having it take off and having it land and having a seat and having someone to serve you a drink and being able to wear clothes and everything about your life. And as you become more aware of how much you have and how much you have to be grateful for, you become less focused on scarcity in what you don't have, because your mind is focused on what you do have. And when your mind is focused on what you do have expands. You begin to develop contented feelings of connectedness with others and with nature. You begin to see that every human being that you meet any place on the planet shares being human with you and what it feels like to be human. You begin to see that there's a oneness to it all, that there's a universal mind, that you're a part of it. And you know that each one of us is connected and that on a round planet we can't choose up sides. That you begin to know that, then you treat the people that you come into contact with the same sense of reverence that you have for yourself, because you are, in fact, that person. It's why Jesus said on the cross when the spear was thrown into him, "Forgive him, Father, for he knows not what he does." The reason he knows not what he does, he doesn't know that he's throwing a spear into himself. Because every time you hurt another human being, you hurt the generic human being. You hurt all of us. And every time you send out love, you create a sense of harmony in that being. You begin to have what she called frequent attacks of smiling. You become more joyous, more merry, more contented as you awaken and get beyond all of this need to accumulate and perform and achieve, which is all wonderful. But when you go beyond it, you begin to develop an increased susceptibility to the love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it to others. Love becomes what you are, and you can't give away what you don't have. And you can only give away what you do have. And if what you have is love, then that's what you find yourself giving away.